Behind every amazing flavor is an amazing human who has perfected their craft. Welcome to Flavors Unknown, a behind-the-scenes look at new flavors and the chefs, pastry chefs, and bartenders who create them, with your host, Emmanuel.
I am your host, Emmanuel Roche. Thank you very much for listening today. Every other week, I interview chefs, pastry chefs, and bartenders to discover their secrets behind the scenes. I want to know what compelled them to become a chef or a bartender. I want to learn everything about their creative process and discover the unknown ingredients that are finding their way in their drinks and dishes. Today is episode number 3, and you can find the show notes at flavorsunknown.com. Click on the episode page. Today, my guest is Chef Jonathan Zaragoza from Birrieria Zaragoza in Chicago, a restaurant with only one main dish on the menu, goat. Chef Jonathan celebrates connection with people through his engagement in the local community, people he meets during his travel back to Mexico, or through his collaboration with other chefs around the country. He will talk about his creative process, rooted in tradition, but based as well on conversation with people. Hi, Chef. Great to have you on Flavors Unknown.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So how would you describe your job in 10 words?
10 words. Rewarding, fun, at times hectic. I would say hectic's one word. Every job has stress, so a little stressful. Let's see, challenging in a positive way, inspiring. Let's see, that what are we at? 6, right?
Yeah, correct.
6. I think important is one right now, especially the way things are as far as like the Mexican scene in the States. I think Mexican restaurants are very important right now. It is a respected career, I think, to be a chef. Honorable. Honest is another one that I like to use. It's an honest profession, honest way to make a living. And I'm having trouble coming up with a couple more, but I think right now that's what I have.
Cool. So, I mean, the one that you mentioned when you say important, especially with the situation in the States and, the Mexican scene, can you develop a little bit?
Yeah, not to get too political with it, but I think given the political landscape of what kind of we've gone through as far as the presidential change in the past 2 years and kind of the platform Mr. Trump took against Mexican people and kind of marginalizing us a bit and maybe not choosing his words well enough, giving him the benefit of the doubt and trying to be nice. But yeah, I think Mexican restaurants and Mexican food in general has always been a real cornerstone of the Mexican tradition. And I talked about this in my staff meeting maybe 2 weeks ago to my staff about how important our job is now in the States more than ever, because there are people in our communities that don't have the luxury of traveling back to Mexico to visit their families because they don't have the paperwork to be able to travel back and forth. So they rely on restaurants like us to provide them with a really authentic traditional food to remind them of their homeland. I feel really responsible for that. And I think we're kind of like the gatekeepers for a lot of traditions too. So.
And the restaurant is located in an area in Chicago that is Mexican and Polish, correct?
Correct.
How engaged are you or involved are you with the community?
I go to my former community college, which is on the southwest side of Chicago, to go teach classes and about Mexican food and talk to the kids and young adults about, what culinary school means and how to because it's not for everybody. School's not for everybody. I dropped out of culinary school twice, so I understand that. But I think what school provides for these kids and young adults, I think, is cornerstones and kind of building blocks, stuff to build upon, discipline. It kind of allows them to be creative, but it holds them accountable at the same time. So I do talks at different grammar schools in my old culinary school. And we do, food drives and events and a bunch of stuff around the city. And people support us, our community supports us, and we try to give back in return. But, what our community has given us is I don't think you can ever repay that. We're so thankful. We're going into our 11th year at the restaurant. So, you talk about people coming out and supporting you, the proof's in the pudding, 11 years, it's crazy.
So your family restaurant in Chicago is called Birrieria Zaragoza.
Yeah.
So how would you explain what the restaurant is about and what Birria is?
So Birrieria Zaragoza has been around since brick and mortar restaurant has been around since 2007. But my dad learned how to make the recipe in around 2002, end of 2001. He traveled back to Mexico to learn to make this recipe with Miguel Segura in his hometown of La Barca, Jalisco. That's famous for this oven roasted goat dish that we serve at our restaurant. And it's the only dish that we have. So my dad learned when I was about 11. And when he came back, and he'd go back and forth, and with the help of my mother, they kind of perfected the recipe. And I was always involved somehow, whether it was running to get something at the store, coming back and helping him out. I was only 12. And that's when my dad started really kind of teaching me, because he did need a little help. He didn't need a lot of help. He kind of had it. I think he did it to keep me around and keep me out of trouble. So I learned at a young age how to cook this dish and how to really kind of learn the ins and outs of it. But, like everything in this life, there's days that if you take the dish for granted, it'll let you know that it's still there, whether it be the goat burning or something. And it keeps you really humble and honest, even though we serve one dish at the restaurant. So yeah, I've been cooking it since 12. So I'm 29. It's been a while cooking it. Pretty amazing.
And can you explain what the dish is about?
Yeah, absolutely. So the process is pretty simple. We take local goats. We get them fresh twice a week. We butcher them in-house. So we kind of break them down into smaller pieces. We season them with sea salt. And then they get steam cooked at that point to make them almost tender. And then after they're done steam cooking, we marinate them in a red mole, which is ancho chilies and some spices. And then at that point, we'll roast them in the oven at a pretty high temperature in lard to get it nice crisp, and the mole kind of sticks and becomes like a really nice flavoring for the meat. We'll take it out once it's nice and crispy, but still tender. We'll chop it up, and we serve this tomato-based broth over top, which I think sets us apart from other birrerias. Is the style of ours is more dry. It's not a stew. There's a textural contrast. There's spice. There's, good fat in there. And, it's roasted in lard. I know lard in the United States is a 4-letter word, quite literally, but I feel like people use butter but won't use lard. I'm like, well, what's the difference here? They're both flavor. They're both frowned upon by the medical profession, but they're delicious. I think that kind of sets us apart from other birrerias, is the distinct style of roasting and using a vegan broth, basically, and using some fermentation to kind of give us that umami and to cut through the richness of the meat. So I think it's just, it's unique. It's a very unique dish, and, it has to be, because we only serve one dish at a restaurant. So it better be good, right?
and as well, some outstanding tortillas.
Yeah. Handmade tortillas. You nailed it. Our masa specialists, as we call them, our masa angels. They're amazing. I don't know. They have magic in their hands, these women, but yeah, I think, like I said, masa in Mexico means dough, but, corn is such a essential part of the Mexican diet. And it's such a versatile ingredient if you know how to use it. And the process of nixtamal is the process of adding the mineral lime to the corn kernels and cooking it in hot water and then milling it and pressing it into a tortilla is pretty amazing. And we do it at our restaurant, and it's just such an essential part of the Mexican diet and our birria dish.
Yeah, so I had the pleasure to come to your restaurant. So I remember that you have as well a series of, or at least one sauce, correct? That we can pour and put on the tortilla and the birria. Yeah,
correct. So our menu consists of 3 things. That's the birria, so the oven roasted goat dish with the tomato consomme. Quesadilla. So there's 2 of them on the menu. You can either get the corn tortilla with Chihuahua cheese in there, or you can get the 2 corn tortillas stuffed with Chihuahua cheese and the meat. And so it's using the same ingredients that we have in house. And then the other one is the salsa de molcajete. It's a fire roasted Roma tomato salsa with garlic that's roasted as well, and arbol chili to kind of give it a nice punchy kick. And it's made stone ground in a mortar and pestle, a molcajete, and the tejolote, which is the little rock that you grind it with. But and then we have a hot sauce, an arbol chili hot sauce that we serve on the side. But yeah, simple.
How do you explain the growing popularity of the goat here in the US?
I think it's pretty awesome, man. I think we at Zaragoza's were at the forefront of a lot of things. You know, we were absolutely at the forefront of being a restaurant that dedicates itself to one thing only. We were a goat-centric restaurant from out of the gate. And now you see goat on the menus. And I think goat's kind of, I don't want to say replacing lamb, but it's definitely giving lamb a run for its money. And as somebody that's been a part of a restaurant that kind of started a movement as far as goat goes in the United States, I mean, you know that goat is the most eaten meat in the world. You know, in Mexico, it's pretty common. But in the States, I think, the U.S. invented the drive-through and the supermarket and the boneless chicken wing. And I think as Americans, we're kind of scared of seeing bones. But, 10, 11 years ago when we started the restaurant, we kind of just said, you know what, we're going to serve one thing and we're going to do it our way. And, fingers crossed that people like it. And, here we are 11 years later, and we're kind of like so thankful for the response from people. And it goes to show you that, like, I wouldn't say it works out all the time, but if you stick to your guns and you do it well and you do it for the right reasons and you have good intentions, as corny as it sounds, a lot of things are possible.
Why this decision from your dad, I guess, 11 years ago to focus on having only one specific dish on the menu, which is very different from, most of the restaurants?
Absolutely. I think in talking to my father, he wanted to have more time with his family, and kind of, it was a decision more of a lifestyle change for him. He was tired of the rat race. He was working in corporate America, and he wanted to be his own boss. And I think my dad, as straight and narrow as he is, he's very much of a rebel. And I think that's what I got from him. We're very rebellious. We're very curious people, and we're very driven. I think it was more of a kind of like a protest to the status quo on his end. I think he wanted something different. And when you get so frustrated with something, you kind of do the polar opposite of what you were doing. And he made sure to focus on it. And, because of his decision and my mom's decision and their sacrifices, I get to do what I do every day, which is amazing. That's kind of like the epitome of the American dream. Your parents make sacrifices, your grandparents make sacrifices, and it's up to you to make it better. And that's really what all I'm doing is I'm trying not to mess up the groundwork laid in front of me by my grandparents, by my parents. So
you are coming from a Mexican family. So we're in September. So what the Hispanic Heritage Month means to you?
Oh man. Again, not to get political with it, but it kind of is a thing where it's becoming, for me, it's been the past couple of years, it's been way more important. We've gotten so many accolades at that little restaurant. It's amazing. We've been so lucky. We are kind of like a cornerstone in the Chicago Mexican and Latino scene here. We were contacted by Hennessy last year to do an ad with Hennessy in collaboration with our restaurant. And the premise of it was to be released around this time and to talk about how we fit into the Latino food scene in Chicago. And they had us go to different restaurants that are Latino owned or Latino themed and talk to these owners and stuff. And, not just Mexican restaurants, we're talking South American, Brazilian, Argentinian, and another Mexican restaurant and a Cuban restaurant. And we're talking to these owners, and everyone's story is kind of similar. Like, we are doing things that we just kind of always known, and we're just bringing it to the United States. And I think Hispanic Heritage Month celebrates that. I think it celebrates our diversity as Latinos, as Latino Americanos, because we are immigrants here. And I think Hispanic Heritage Month is just that. It celebrates how different we are, but how similar we are. In traveling, you just came back from Nashville, like you said, you see different things every trip. You see how people live, and you're like, man, I kind of do something similar at home. I think that's the biggest thing. And I when I go to the classrooms and talk to these kids, and a lot of the inner city kids are focused on material things, I'm like, guys, if you want those things, it's okay to want nice things. It's okay. But you need to work hard for it. You need to do it in an honest way. And the biggest thing, and to knock down the prejudice in our future generations, is to give them the opportunity to travel and to experience something different than them and get them out of their comfort zone. So I really do tell these kids, I'm like, hey, for Christmas, instead of like a toy, ask your parents for a passport and ask them for a trip and have them take you somewhere, even if it's across the border to Canada or Mexico or something, but get out and see something different. And I think with that, that's what my parents did to me. And, you know, it's really, really helped me traveling and kind of experiencing other people's cultures. I think that's, it's a thing that we miss sometimes as Americans.
And you just came back from another trip to Mexico. I follow you on Instagram.
Yeah.
So where were you this time? And what is it so important for you, you know, about those trips back to Mexico?
You know, I just talked about my parents. I hated it as a kid. For some reason, I used to play baseball. So at the end of baseball season, which was like late July, about a month before school started, in that month, they'd send me to Mexico with my grandparents. Most summers, not all summers, but most of them. I hated it because I wanted to be with my friends and, you know, I wanted to be hanging out here, and I kind of fought it. I was, again, a rebel, but they would send me out there. And now as an adult, and I travel out there and I see what they were trying to do and I see what they were trying to instill in me, and, you know, it's there. So when I go to Mexico, I just feel at home, man. I just came back from Oaxaca, and I think the biggest thing that I take away from these trips is the food. Yeah, the technique is fine. I pick up on a lot of those things, the flavors. I think the connection with the people is the biggest thing for me. You know, the stories of these small town people and the similarities between my family and theirs is so, it's just so tight knit. And I think, you know, these people dedicate their lives to one thing, and it's like, well, hey, we do that out here too. So I think that for me is the most fulfilling thing, is just the connection with the people and discovering that we are more alike than we are similar. So yeah, that's the biggest takeaway from my trips.
And one of the previous one, you met with Diana Kennedy. So can you talk about her and who she is?
Oh man, yeah, that kind of came out of nowhere. The whole thing of like ask and you shall receive. So we contacted her handler in Los Angeles, and you know, we're going to be driving through or pretty close to where she lives, and you know, maybe she says yes. And we were expecting, you know, not even to get a response for our email, and sure enough, Diana agreed to see our group, and thank God one of my friends that kind of set it up, and we met with her. And I talk a lot, obviously, as your listeners will find out because I'm rambling on. But in that moment when I met Diana, I was just a fly on the wall, basically. And I was just listening and kind of absorbing all this knowledge. And, you know, she's 96 years old and she still has this energy, this vibrant kind of energy. And it's inspiring because I'm 29, but man, if I can make it to that age and still be that fiery, that'd be an accomplishment. You know, she's an encyclopedia with Mexican food, and she's done the research, and she's really paved the way for a lot of young cooks and chefs like myself to kind of take over you pick up where she left off. And I think a lot of cooking is that. Like, I know there's a lot of chefs that are very selfish and proprietary with their recipes, but for me, cooking has always been about sharing. That's the way I grew up. That's the way my mom taught me. You share a meal with somebody, you share a moment, it's very intimate. And I think, you know, that's what I learned from Diana, and cooking is a lot of sharing and inspiring others. And I think that's what I took away from her. But, you know, I see these shows that are competitive and, oh, it's so-and-so versus this person on, you know, a chef show or something. And our jobs aren't competitive like that. Cooks and chefs are nurturers by nature. That's what I've been learning on these trips is, you know, how to share and how to be in the moment. Diana definitely hit on those notes.
So beside Diana, who are the chefs that you look up to?
I know people usually say like, oh, a chef on TV and stuff. But for me, it's a chef that I worked for. His name's Andrew Zimmerman. He owns Sepia. It's a Michelin-starred restaurant here in Chicago. He's also a Star Chef's winner. I was working for him at the time when he won. And he now opened up a new restaurant called Proxy right next door to Sepia. I'm in the West Loop here in Chicago. And he's honestly one of my biggest inspirations. I knew from the day I met him that I was like, this guy's like, kind of has like, I don't know if you're a Star Wars fan, but he had like a Jedi energy to him. Very, 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 just kind of a calm demeanor and very methodical. And I kind of emulated him from an early start. And I kind of see what he's done and his legacy and the cooks that have worked for him. And it just kind of drives me to try to be somewhat like him. And I think Andrew is one of my kitchen heroes and my chef dad, if you will. You know, I only worked for him for a brief time at Sepia before I moved on, but he's the type of guy where I can send him a text and, run an idea by him, and he'll always respond, with an honest and open answer. And he's always been able to talk to me and about stuff. And this is a guy that's won Michelin stars and, James Beard nominated and Jean Benchet award winning. And this guy is the most humble dude and great man. He's a great father to his kids. Honestly, like, we talk about cooking, but at the end of the day, it's about being a good human being. I think he exemplifies that pretty well.
I've seen as well on, Instagram that you are constantly collaborating with other chefs around the country.
Yeah.
So what do you gain from these experiences?
So, like I said, I mentioned earlier that I'm a 2-time culinary school dropout. So I really relied on other people as my education and cooking and learning and, messing things up along the way and learning, okay, I won't do that again. And that's the way I kind of learn, is kind of going through the process. So these events are very much that. They personify that kind of like methodology. So I organize these events, whether I get contacted for them or I set them up myself, and I work with these people, and it's a form of an education for me. Everyone has a different way to do something, and I always like learning the other ways to do, something that I know how to do maybe, or they have a different view on it or a different technique. And that's, again, we come back to the sharing. Chefs share different things, there's no harm in sharing. They say, you light a candle, just because you light another candle with that one, it doesn't mean it goes out. The flame stays and you pass it on. So I think that comes back to the whole sharing thing. These collaborations are that. We inspire different ideas. We inspire each other to be better, and we build friendships and community along the way.
So I would like now to talk a little bit about innovation. Can you describe to me your creative process?
Yeah, I think it depends on my mood. I'm a very emotional person. Most days I wake up and the first thing I do is put music on over my speakers. And I think within the first couple minutes of the day, when I sit up from waking up, I have a mood that I'm in. Some days will be bossa nova. Some days will be funk. Some days will be psychedelic cumbia from Brazil or something like that, or hip hop. It just depends. So it depends on the day of what I'm inspired by. Most of the time, my creative process is steeped in tradition. So the traveling really helps me out. It could depend on the weather. It could depend on anything. I get inspired by having conversations with people, asking them something, and they tell me a story of their childhood and stuff. And I'm like, oh, we should make that. At the restaurant when I make staff meal, I usually kind of pick an employee and ask them, oh, did your mom ever make this? And yeah, she made it this way. And that's how staff meal usually comes about. It's just somebody telling a story and somebody saying, oh, I'm craving this for this day. My mom used to make it this way. And that's how we kind of do it. So my creative process is pretty much that, is asking people, having a conversation with them, and then kind of working on a dish together.
So as an example, tell me how, about the time when you turned a family restaurant into a pop-up ramen spots. And it seems that based on the popularity and of that moment, you are doing this on a regular basis.
We try to do a pop-up at the restaurant a month. So we'll try to do 12 a year. And that's really, for us, it's very, very, it's ambitious because it's a small restaurant. If you've been there, it's a very labor intensive process. So to execute a dinner for like 40 people, which is what the pop-ups are, it's very hard. And I'm the only one cooking. So in a way, it's really, really cool because it's, Jonathan made all your food. Like, I made all your food, but at the same time, it's challenging from a business owner standpoint. But yeah, the ramen one was super cool. That was the first one of the year. It was January. And actually Bon Appetit wrote us up about it, which is nuts. So yeah, we did a Mexican Japanese kind of like mashup making Japanese kind of we had the yakitori, but we had like an izakaya style menu. And I think, Japanese street food and Mexican street food, there's so many parallels. So we did that. And the main course was the pozole ramen, which had goat in it. It had like a kind of like a skemen, which is like the double boiled broth with pork. It has some chicken in there. We use goat bones in ours. And the technique was Japanese for the broth, but the flavoring was from Mexico. And it was just really cool. My friend Shin Thompson made chili de arbol noodles for ramen. It was just like a really, really cool event that a lot of people had a hand in because when I announced it, everyone reached out. They're like, "Oh, can we help? This is such a cool idea." And it just goes to show you, like, the community in Chicago, like, we all support each other and we all try to make each other better and inspire one another. And I think that's the beauty of these pop-ups is, most of the audience is people in the industry. So chefs, servers come out. It doesn't matter, different restaurants, and they come out. It's BYOB. They have a great time in our little shop, and that room is small, but when you see these events, it just feels like smaller, and it's amazing. It's a great feeling.
So what were the other themes that you used for the other pop-up?
I know we did a Spanish pop-up. We did, it's a Mexican restaurant, so no matter what, you're going to have Mexican kind of an ingredient or a plan, a dish. We did a vegan Indian dinner. My friend Charlie Welsh and I, he's a great chef as well. We did an Indian vegan dinner. We did a vegetarian Mexican dinner, which was awesome. But, it just, again, it depends on the season, what we want to cook. And then we kind of work back from that, tying into the creative process. Sometimes, the seasons dictate what you cook. Right now, corn's popping up everywhere. So if we did one right now, it'd be a very corn-centric menu.
So when is the next one coming up?
I think we're going to do one in December. We're going to do like a Mexican Christmas. So it'll be tamales, pozole, traditional mom food for like a family gathering during the holidays in Mexico. I think it's going to be the next one that we do.
So you're talking about mom food. I read again on your Instagram that the influence of women are quite important in the cooking for you.
Oh my God. Yeah. I think without women, men would be nowhere. Obviously, and especially with cooking, because I talked about this with my mother and my grandmother, and why they started cooking, and while the old school saying of like, oh, well, the men are off providing, the women stay at home and cook, and that's their job. And it's like, yeah, but anyone could go out and work, but the women are the ones that are dealing with the family and raising these kids, and they're kind of not to take anything away from the guys that hard work, but they're the ones that are the flame holders of tradition. They create tradition. The Mexican food scene is created by these women, housewives, if you will, way back in the day. And that's all they did is cook. From the beginning of their day, they would go to the mill and mill the corn, come back and make tortillas for breakfast and fry the eggs and make the salsa that they're going to use for lunch as well. They're so crafty and they're so driven to provide for their family, like this experience that's so wholesome and so nurturing. And I was raised by my parents, obviously, but I gravitated towards my mom's family more. Her mother would take care of me. And the first 5 cousins were all women, and well, not women, but all girls, and then me. So I was just surrounded by women all the time. So I that's all I really knew. That's what my cooking is. I feel way more comfortable cooking at my restaurant because my restaurant is mostly women above 40. For some reason, that's who wants to work at our restaurant, and that's who we hire. And that's who honestly, no offense to anybody, but that's who I trust tasting my food. They don't BS with me. I don't know if we could swear on the show, but they don't BS me. They say, I'll have them taste something and be like, it was better yesterday. And maybe you should add this. And they're not scared of me. Where, a kid out of culinary school, an American kid out of culinary school would kind of blow sunshine up my butt and be like, yeah, chef, this is great. These women are like, no, it needs salt. It was better yesterday. You need to cook this more down and all this stuff. So for me, it's a superstition thing, but I feel more comfortable cooking with Mexican women in my kitchen. It's kind of funny.
I'd like to come back to the topic of the pop-up. What will be the most important learning that you can share with others when it comes to putting together a pop-up?
I think the most important thing is just be yourself for these pop-ups and cook the food that you believe in. As young cooks and young human beings, we try to do a lot that isn't really us, whether it be a high school kid, dressing a certain way to impress his friends. And it's the same thing with young chefs. I look at my food when I was 21 and I look at it now being 29, it's pretty different. I think that's the biggest thing I take away from the pop-ups is be yourself, obviously be organized and work with people that you believe in and believe in you. But I think, as a young chef, I was trying to do too much. We talk about inspiration and creative process, but was watching a documentary on fashion of all things, and they're talking about Yves Saint Laurent, and they came across Coco Chanel and, you know, the big names and stuff in fashion. It came to a quote of hers, and it was her methodology of how she got dressed before she went to an event. And she's like, when I thought I was ready, I would look in the mirror and I would take one thing off, and then I was ready. In the creative process, it starts as super ambitious, and then we kind of take a day and then look what needs to be there and what doesn't, and we take away the things that don't need to be there, and then we work on the things that need to be there, and we work hard on them to make them kind of come together. And then I think that kind of makes a dish. And I think the creative process is that, and during these pop-ups, it's to be inspired, it's to create something, it's to build upon the things that you cook for that pop-up, and hopefully, you know, you can keep working on those dishes later on and kind of perfect them, if you will. But I think that's the biggest thing for pop-ups. Be yourself, be driven, and work with people that want to work with you and you want to work with and you want to be inspired by.
And be simple and be honest. That's one of the keywords that you used at the beginning.
Yeah, it's be honest, and people can tell if you're faking with food. I've been to dinners and I'm like, okay, cool, this is beautiful and it tastes good and it's technically sound, but it's not inspired. And that's when people start cooking with their brains and not from the soul. So I think if you cook with soul and then work backwards and make it look nice, I think people respond to that a little bit better.
So I'm interested into ingredients and flavors and something a bit different and unfamiliar. So if there's any things that you can share with us about unique and unfamiliar ingredients that you have been exploring lately.
Sure. I think for me, especially traveling to Oaxaca, it's chilies and the way they respond to different cooking techniques. It's like any other ingredient, but chilies are so, you know, depending on how you treat them initially, it builds a base for your sauce or whatever condiment that you're using. Chilies, or chiles as we call them in Mexico, are kind of the thing I'm obsessed with right now. And, you know, today I made a sauce that super simple. It's caramelized onion, and then we kind of sweat garlic into that caramelized onion. And then instead of adding it's a tomato sauce, instead of adding the tomatoes there, I take the arbol chili that's been toasted and made into a powder, and I bloom it with the caramelized onion in the fat with the garlic. And when you put the tomatoes in there and you taste it, it tastes super floral and spicy and deep and delicious and rich. But we're talking about a sauce that has 4 ingredients. And then you can cook anything in that sauce. You know, you can put some shrimp in there if you'd like, or, you know, throw a little bit of chopped olives in there and some fried capers, and get like a Veracruz style sauce from the eastern coast of Mexico. But it's just a different technique to kind of bloom your chilies or toast them on the comal. And some moles, they take the seeds out of them and they blacken the seeds and rinse them and puree them with the toasted chilies. And just, man, there's so many different things you can do with the chilies. And I'm kind of exploring that right now.
American consumers discovered, you know, the jalapeno, and then the dry version with the chipotle. Mm-hmm. And then after that, it was hero. And then lately we have, ancho chile. So what do you think would be the next one being like the popular next chili?
The habanero is awesome. It's my best friend Charlie's favorite chili, one of his favorites. Like, we go to this Mariscos place, which is a Mexican seafood place, and they put a little chopped red onion mixed in with some sliced thin habanero and just cover it with lime juice and oregano. And the guy like eats so much of it, and he's sweating and he's feeling good and all this stuff. But I think habanero chilies are so fun, man. And they have such a nice fruity flavor to them. They kind of have like a pineapple tropical feel to them. All chilies are very versatile. And I think it's what you like. Do you want smoky? You know, we talked about chipotle. Do you like sweet, or do you like them both? You know, you can do a pasilla chili, which is both spicy and smoky and has a really nice flavor to it. But again, it's what you like. I think the next biggest chili in Mexico, it's a kind of a sleeper, but it's the piquin. It's this tiny chili. It's about the size of like your pinky nail, but holy cow, it'll knock you out. It's so delicious too.
So let's focus on one common ingredients. Like we were talking about the shrimps and the prawns. Mm-hmm. So what would be a suggestion for a home cook, how to prepare them, but with a unique and a different twist?
If you're working with prawns, there's a cool technique that I like to do, and it's putting heating up a cast iron skillet, medium high heat, and getting it kind of almost to a smoke. And then you put like a rock salt or like a sea salt or on top of it. And then you put your prawns on top of it and let them cook for like a minute, like with no oil. And then you drizzle some olive oil over them and it smokes and it's so tasty. And it's like searing a piece of meat, basically. But you put, hot skillet, a little bit of salt, your prawns on there, let them cook for a little bit, and then you hit it with olive oil. And it'll smoke and it'll start cooking and give some fat, and then you flip them. And then you can either finish with a sauce or take them out or whatever you want to do. But I think that like that smoking and the salt is such a cool technique. It is, I've seen it done in Veracruz before. Veracruz is super, super influenced by the Spanish. It was the first place they landed in Mexico. So it could be a Spanish technique if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, it's really cool the way they treat seafood in Veracruz.
So how would you source and select the ingredients when you are not a chef and then you want to have access to quality and fresh ingredients?
Having access to quality ingredients starts with shopping at a good grocery store. We have a wonderful store called Local Foods here in Chicago. It's off of Elston. There's a butcher there named Rob Levitt, who's also a great friend, but they source their meat from the Pryor Farms. It's a great farmer. Their vegetables are locally grown as well. If you go and support local markets and you get to know these producers and farmers and have conversations with them and introduce yourself to them and support every week, show up at your same time and, hey, good to see you, so-and-so, like, what do you got today? And they'll tell you and how to cook it and all this stuff. And again, we come back to that creative process and it's connection with people. And I think that's what home cooks need to do is get out, support your local farmers, local market, local butcher, and build these relationships and change the food culture that we currently have.
So now it's the time for the rapid fire questions.
Oh man, cool.
So where do you eat when you are not cooking in your restaurant?
I have a go-to restaurant. It's called Lula Cafe. It's in Logan Square. Jason Hamill's the chef. It's an awesome restaurant and they treat you super nice and it's a really very nice place to be. So Lula Cafe.
Give me 3 dishes you could not live without cooking or eating.
Okay, eating, it's going to be my mom's pozole. It's going to be my grandmother's pork ribs and salsa verde. And cooking, I can't live without my birria, because that pays the bills.
If you weren't a chef, what would you be?
I would be an interior designer. I think there's a lot of parallels between both careers. You spend all this time developing your taste and your personal taste and learning from different furniture producers and stuff. And then, but you still have to respect what the client wants. And I think I have an eye for design. I design my whole apartment. So I would definitely, I don't know why, I just have a knack for that stuff.
Are you pork or beef?
Man, again, it depends on the day, but I think I lean more towards pork.
And are you tequila or mezcal?
Mezcal. And I'm going to catch a lot of crap because I'm from Jalisco, but mezcal is so diverse and so delicious. And I think it's a little bit more interesting. So my Jalisco people, I'm so sorry.
So I would like to thank you very much, Chef, for being part, of the podcast and joining us at Flavors Unknown.
Man, this is super fun. You're so good at it. You're a great interviewer, man. So happy to be a part of it.
Thank you for listening today. And if you have any comments, you are always more than welcome to. Just head to flavorsunknown.com and click on the contact page. I see you in 2 weeks. And until then, remember that people who love to eat are always the best people.
Thanks for listening to Flavors Unknown. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave a review. Find the show notes at flavorsunknown.com. And if you want to join the Flavors Unknown community, search Flavors Unknown on Instagram and Twitter.